how can people become parents, right? You mentioned the insemination through donor. And so there's different ways of getting donors. So it's known donor or anonymous donor. Okay, so there's pros and cons of each. If you're in a same-sex relationship, it's not like you can just decide to have a baby. You have to be super intentional, and there are ways to do it. And so today we want to give you highlights on how to do this, especially for the ladies out there, just because we see that more often. Although we do get surrogates that come into the clinic for pre and post embryo transfer treatments for the intended parents that are male same-sex couples. But to speak more to trying to conceive, if you're in same-sex coupledom, it requires effort. And I always say, the equation of infertility, it's like you're infertile just by the way of lacking sperm or lacking egg, which is a technical problem. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a physical problem. And the problem when I see that people go to the fertility clinic, sometimes they walk away feeling like I am infertile as a human being, which is a lot of times not true at all. Does that make sense to you, Tanya, what I'm saying here?
For sure. And then in some cases, unfortunately, they do learn that they have subfertility. So I've also seen that where they kind of think, okay, well, my only obstacle is that I don't have sperm. So we're going to go. It's going to be easy. We can do intrauterine insemination where they take the sperm and they, wash it and then insert it. And, and then they find out that they actually have clinical, medical conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome or endometriosis, which could be impacting the time to conceive,
Yes. And so I think this is a really, really great point to be had. So if you're watching, by the way, thank you for tuning in. And secondly, if you're not in a place of, I want to have a baby now, it would be really great just to get your baseline fertility to see where you're at and to see if you actually have some challenges that you might want to address. And you can see someone like Dr. Tanya Wild, who's a naturopathic doctor. You can go for acupuncture with someone like me, right? Like there's lots of things that you can do.
You can look at basic things like how are your menstrual cycles? Are you ovulating? Are you menstruating regularly? You can look at your anti-Müllerian hormone to check for ovary reserve. So between an acupuncturist and naturopathic doctor in your village, you can find out a lot of information through clinical symptoms and blood work just to kind of get a baseline. And then we can kind of guide you sooner, depending on your health status, to fertility clinics sooner if it's in your future. And you're thinking, you know what, let's prep ahead and be proactive.
Yeah. And then so it's about living a healthy life up until then. And of course, when you're trying, you want to lead as healthy of a life as possible. So we do see people being proactive. So for example, we'll see people that will do acupuncture on a monthly basis. Because to me, actually, acupuncture is a way of life because it treats, in the past, it's about being proactive. So back in the days of the emperor, the Chinese physician, was paid when the emperor was well and not when he was sick. So similarly for, trying to keep your fertility health strong, then you might want to do something like this with proactive measures with whatever you're doing.
Well, and then when you're working on your egg quality, you're working on not just improving your potential to conceive, but your quality of life because your hormones are healthier. So you're doing a lot for yourself. I read this article the other day, and it was, how people really prioritize as number one, no matter where we live in the world, family health. So you and your family need to take care of, yourselves, like each other, I should say, and you rank that highest, even though in our Western kind of culture, we say we're selfish and we take care of ourselves. We really need to work on that more so that we can then have that energy to take care of each other and take care of children eventually
in the future.
In the picture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, I always say our mission at Alive, Tanya is part of our Alive team, It's like our mission is not just to take care of the individual in front of us, but really the health of the next generation, which involves you being responsible for yourself for now and into the future. Because once you have a kid, we want you to stick around for a very long time. So back to, how can people become parents, right? You mentioned the insemination through donor. And so there's different ways of getting donors. So it's known donor or anonymous donor. I covered in my book Pathways to Pregnancy, but we'll bring it up a little bit. Okay, so there's pros and cons of each. But I'll tell you one thing for sure. It's way, way, way more work if you use a donor that is a known donor when you go to the fertility clinic, because they have to be tested. And typically there's like a 6-month wait with a known donor. When you have a donor that is through a sperm bank, so these like vials of sperm ready to go, they've already been pre-tested. So they're literally ready to go as soon as you buy it. So that's one main difference, because you have to wait on the timing, right? And then secondly, you need to think more than just about the donor sperm. You have to look at, what does that look like in the future if you have a person that you know? Is there going to, do you want this person to be involved with child rearing or child care? Like, how much does this person participate, or do you not want that at all? Anyway, this is really not the topic of the book, because we're looking at how to get pregnant, but it's something that you want to discuss with probably a therapist of some sort, to talk about all these things that you don't even consider. When it comes to IUI, intrauterine insemination, we can do that at home or at a fertility clinic. Typically, fertility clinics don't recommend you to do it at home with like a turkey baster that's not sterile. You're going to say something, I think, before I was...
No, I was going to say, I mean, I think that it's important that if you are going to use something like a turkey baster, that the fertility clinic would have provided that for you, and then screened your part, like the donor, with, for sexually transmitted diseases, to be sure that you are inseminating and you're going to stay healthy doing so. So no matter how much you think you know somebody, you don't know viruses and bacteria and how they work. Like, they're hidden. So
right,
it's really important to do those screenings, no matter how awkward the conversation. I think it is better to do it through a fertility clinic, because there's also, like you were saying, legal obligations, or working out through like logistics around like how much involvement, and avoid involving lawyers. It seems very harmless now, but then later there could be issues around, who's the parent or whatever. You know what I mean? Like how much involvement they're allowed to have and that kind of stuff. So
right,
like having it all up front, written out, legal papers, is really important. So even though you said, oh, it's a topic to be discussed later, I think it's a really important topic, because in a world where you can have more of a village, that's great, but it has to be defined ahead of time.
Yeah, 100%. I have a couple that it was a really beautiful scenario. Their donor was out west. And so every time they would do the insemination, they'd have to fly over there. It was a big chore, but, it worked. And so is that person involved? Yes, but not on the day-to-day. They know who the donor is, and they'll have a visit, but, they're not the parent, right? So it's worked out in that way. But then other people's like, no way, I don't want that in my life.
Yeah,
right?
It's kind of nice to be anonymous on the other hand, too, because to have an anonymous donor, because then you can... Let's say in the case of 2 women, and let's say you have to choose who's going to be carrying the baby. And let's say I was going to be carrying the baby, and I wanted to have the, let's say I was using, like, there's just so many ways to do it. I could use my own eggs, or I could use my partner's eggs, and then I could be the one to carry it. But I could use my partner's eggs if we're doing IVF, and then have embryos made. So that's one way of doing it. And then, but I could use my heritage, right? So there's like ways to make it so that you're both really involved. And I had one of my besties did that. Yeah. So she carried the baby, then she used her wife's eggs, and then they used sperm that was more her background culturally. So then you can choose with an anonymous donor. That'd be a lot more complicated if it was if you're wanting a a known donor to find somebody who's your background. So it kind of gives you that opportunity.
Yeah, and of course I have seen it where it's one person that's carrying, not using her eggs, but the partner's brother's sperm.
Right.
So
That's
there's so many different
super
iterations.
cool. Right. Because there's so many options. That would be wonderful, because then you now have basically it's your baby, but your DNA is involved. So
yes,
such a great idea.
Yes and no. Again, it really depends on the family dynamics. If you
Right.
don't have a brother that you get along with, maybe not the best idea.
Right. So you have to work all the logistics out ahead of time. But we're just kind of stating the options. And, I don't think you'd be asking a brother, like you definitely want to be close to that brother, or have it, even if you're close, write it down, all the specifications legally, because things change. As time goes on.
So by the way, there are very specific lawyers that do this for a living, like all day long. So you'd want to go to a fertility lawyer. They deal with all these kinds of issues. And so we mentioned earlier, so I do want to address this. So same-sex male couples that will obviously need someone else's eggs. And most of the time what I've seen is that the people that donate their eggs are different than the people that carry. So the surrogate person is different and not donating their eggs.
I think that makes sense, because if I was going to be a surrogate, it would be very hard for me to use my own eggs and then release that baby now to another family, because it's my own DNA. I would struggle with that. I'd be okay with maybe sharing my eggs, let somebody else carry the baby, because there's this change. But, people do that, and there's both ways. So you would definitely...
Wow.
Right?
That's a great insight. That's a great insight, because I've always wondered, we see a lot of surrogate women and I love their stories. Like some of the people we see have carried 3, 4, 5 times. And by the way, this comes true whether you're same sex or not, and just using a surrogate. There's a fear of, who is this person? Can I trust that person? Maybe they're like a little off, right? But I tell you, the people that we meet, they are solid citizens.
So beautiful.
Salt of the earth. And, they have the last one I saw, she had been a surrogate like 6 times. It just blows me away that they would do this, like being this vessel of love.
They're servicing their body so that they can help families who are growing their family. How beautiful is that?
Yeah, very purposeful. So there are so many options, and I hope this is helpful. And is there anything else that we want to cover?
So the other thing I would say is surrogacy can be you can also have 2 women, and the woman who wants to carry, or maybe neither woman can carry for whatever reason. So they might need surrogacy. No, I'm just saying that it might be like if they have big fibroids, or if there's issues with, let's say they do find out that there's clinical conditions, so it's not just same-sex men. And then what about adopting or fostering?
Yes,
or do
of
you want
course.
to go there? Yeah. Or donor embryos. Like you can also, adopt an embryo.
Right. Yes, that is there for sure. And I know we're speaking to this like it's off the cuff and it's easy. And we know that this journey can be very emotional.
Oh, yeah.
And it is tough trying to figure out which direction you go, right? It's like you go into this restaurant and there's like a zillion things on the menu, and it's hard to figure out which one you want to do, which one you want to choose. And just know that like it can be tough. And sometimes I'm going to address this because oftentimes, well, I don't know how often, but I see this a lot in clinic. So you'll have a woman that is older than the other woman, and maybe the older person goes to the fertility clinic, gets tested, and then maybe they're considered subfertile, is what you would call it, Tanya. And the doctor may say, well, why don't you try instead, like turning to the younger partner. And I just think that is so dismissive of the person. That's like, we need to honor the journey of each person, because it's like you have this visualization of how the pregnancy will go, even in the same-sex relationship. Right?
Yes, because you can take turns, for example, despite the age, being the one to carry the baby. And, there is something special. A lot of women, they have this like instinctual want or urge to carry the baby, regardless of if it's an embryo donor, if it's their own egg, if it's the partner's egg. So, just honoring that need to satisfy that, despite what, you're told, if there's a 35-year-old and a 38-year-old. So don't kind of just take that dismissal, find out what your options really are.
And so to conclude, though, we do want to say again that, yes, there may be the suboptimal piece, but that does not preclude you and have you actually be infertile, right?
Right. And there are a lot of things we
that.
can do to help you. We can support you with nutrition, as we were mentioning earlier, take care of you as a family, as an individual, and work on your egg quality, nutrition, and get acupuncture to improve circulation to the ovaries and or to the uterus to help with implantation, depending on what kind of procedures you're going through. We can guide you through that, a little more closely. We work very well with some local Ontario fertility clinics. So we are here for you.
If this has been helpful, please subscribe and share so that other people will know and find out about our podcast and YouTube channel so that you can get all the information you need and make an informed choice.